Well, here we are on an extremely good morning. Any morning that Pat McGart comes and joins the conversation is a superb morning, but this is a stellar good one because the sun is shining not just in the county of Antrim, but also in the county of Donegal. Isn't that correct, Pat? What's your temperature right now?
Jude, this is definitely going to be our summer. Today, what is it's been? I think every time I go out in the wee car, look at the gauge and it says weather gauge thing, and it's been over 20 degrees every day. I think this week so far.
Wow.
Jesus, Jude, yesterday was absolutely superb. And I went out, what day? One of the days went out. Okay, the car was sitting on the sun, but it said 27 degrees. Now it wasn't 27 degrees, obviously, but I presume it was 22, 23.
Well, here, Pat, here's a question for you. This has nothing to do with general and current affairs, but if at the age of, say, 50,
Yeah,
you'd been offered a similar job to one you're doing in the Middle East, uh, and you were going to be, the way they do there's no tax, so
yeah,
people are
yeah,
earning huge amounts, and they also look after their, upper workers like yourself. They,
yeah.
they, get really good working conditions, good pay, provide very often for children to be educated, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
Would you take it? Would
healthcare
you
as
have
well.
taken it at 50, Pat?
Very good question. I never thought about it. Now here, let me run this by you. I was editor of the journal. I was 35, and a friend in Australia was an immigration officer, and he told me, "Look, I can get you into Australia, and I can get you a job lecturing at maybe a technical college or a whatever. I don't know, maybe even a university. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, bottom line of it all, he says, but I thought about it and said, at 35, I had three kids. I was too well off in the sense that I wasn't hungry enough. Had I been struggling, I would have taken it surely.
Hmm.
Dude, I'm not sure I like the Middle East society. So if you're asking about the weather and the money, definitely.
Mhm,
But there
mhm.
are other factors involved, dude.
Well, I talked to you about this off air, but anyway,
Mm.
it's to do with a particular person. Anyway, let's look at something that, well, this is one of these stories, Pat. You sent me this story this morning, and it's one of these stories that I've seen it at the back of my mind, and then it kind of, for one reason or another, I dismiss it or allow it to drop off, and it's a shocking bloody story. It really is shocking. Tell us about it.
Jude, the British government, knowing full well the genocide, the absolute massacres day in, day out that's happening in Gaza, and 3 months between October and December 2024, they tripled the supply of armaments to Israel. Now they're dancing on a head of a pin about what they sent and what they didn't send, but they sent something like 187 billion or million in arms to Israel, which was, by the way, is triple what was sent between 2020 and 2023. So here's the so-called working man's party, the Labour Party, sending Israel, who are bombing the poorest people on earth, or one of the poorest people on earth, the Gazans, who's, by the way, where there's 80% unemployment and where there's starvation levels, with so many people living on the breadline. They're sending a big, rich country, Israel, supplied by America, backed by America, who gets billions each year, which doesn't have an army, a navy, or whatever else, an air force. And the British government, who are led by a former human rights lawyer, sends three times what the Tory government had sent. Now, I find that abominable. I think it's immoral. See, when I see Starmer now, the hypocrisy, I feel like, throwing a brick at the television. The hypocrisy, the double standards, the duplicity, and the downright immorality of what he's doing is
Well, Pat, did he announce what he was doing, or was this something that the journalists got in and
well, it was
found
a
out?
report released yesterday, Jude. A report released. I think the campaign against the arms trade got under Freedom of Information got it. There's a woman, I can't remember her name, but her second name's Apple.
Aye.
She says it's untenable. Well, I wrote
Emily,
it down.
Emily Apple.
Emily Apple, sorry, that's exactly what her name is. She says it's untenable, illegal, and immoral what Britain is doing, and that they are complicit in genocide. Do you see when this is all over? I think people like Starmer, no way Blair got done for the war in Iraq, that it's going to stain his legacy forevermore. Amen. Well, the same with Starmer. Macron this week had a real go at Israel. Massive. Starmer has not said a word.
Isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it just? You'd almost despair, wouldn't you? You'd like to
Yeah,
think, and most people were pleased when the Labour Party replaced what clearly was a corrupt government of the
yeah,
Tories, and then
yeah.
to turn around and do worse than them.
Yeah.
How do these people, how do they live
Five
with their conscience? How do they live with their conscience? Or are they doing it under duress? Is there an Israeli lobby that's forcing them
falsehood.
to?
They, uh, um, the Labour Party has got more friends of Israel than I think the Tory Party. Starmer's wife is Jewish. A lot of
And
them have been bought
that
out
wouldn't
by the.
necessarily mean she was in favor of
No,
Israel.
but it means Judy. What I mean to say is, he would be getting fed the Jewish version of them, Israeli version of
Yeah.
what's been done to our people, and really so.
Okay.
By the way, the Jews have suffered very badly in the past, but that's not any excuse for what's happening in Gaza,
Yeah.
dude. The whole thing, dude, is APAC has brought so many Labour Party, dude. Uh, Jeremy Corbyn was drummed out of the Labour Party on trumped up charges of anti-Semitism. A man whose mother and father had led the campaign against Mosley in the 1940s. His parents were out in the street campaigning, and he was then, in other words, standing up for Jewish rights. This is the background Jeremy Corbyn came from, but he was trumped up not because he was anti-Semite, but because he was pure pro-Palestine. That he said they had rights too.
Well, I think there's two things that strike me about this. One is that if you take this is state supplying weaponry, right, on a vast
Yeah,
scale, take that down to a private level. Supposing you set up a little cottage industry and you said to somehow or another, you find ways of advertising the fact, listen, if you're looking for a gun or a knife, come here. I have a good array now, and you
uh,
just pay the money, and I'm at reasonable prices. So you set up, this is how you lived. It helped you to bring in food and bread on the table for your family and a nice house and
uh,
so on. But you were doing it through this selling of guns and
yeah,
weapons of various kinds. That would be an intolerable thought. Nobody who knew
yeah,
you would have anything to do with you. They'd say, "What the hell's wrong
yeah,
with you, my guy?
absolutely.
That's disgusting. You should be
The thing,
fucking
yeah,
arrested." And yet,
yeah,
when it comes to the state, that's okay. And Britain will unabashedly say, "We supply these to states that we believe in," and I mean, it's
yeah.
a thriving industry for them. I see. I wonder how do people. It's a difficult one, but how do people who work in these factories that produce these weapons? How do they feel knowing
Well,
that this
Jude,
bomb and
I think
this?
if you had I think if you had a serious conscience, you wouldn't be working there in the first place. But by the way, Starmer and his apologists have come out with all sorts of bollocks reasons. He's saying failure to supply uh, parts for the F-35s would be a threat to world peace. Dude, what a load of absolute bollocks is that? And so there's 19 nations apparently supplying parts. So I don't think Britain would have pulled out. But the whole thing is the Brits try to deny that they were supplying, and they came out with saying we have refused to do this now. But under the table, Jude, they were supplying them far more. So and David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, I think, Jude, there's a case, as far as I remember, going on at the minute, brought by a couple of human rights organisations. And the government, British government, have told their lawyers to argue that there's no evidence of genocide occurring in
What? What?
Gaza. Jude,
What?
apparently that's one of the arguments
Good
that
God!
there's no credible evidence so far. Jude, Justine McCarthy in the Irish Times today, as far as I remember, says the evidence from verifiable is that 57 kids have died from starvation at least this week. There are 400 and something like 75,000 people on what I think the International Red Cross is, in danger of dying from starvation. I know they're at level 3. In other words, they haven't had real food for weeks and so on. And we're sitting back and so on. And the British government and Trump and all these people. are still sending arms now. Dude, what was it? 50 people or 70 people were injured last night. 100 and someone were killed yesterday. Dude, they're just banging bombs into places right left. And the what is earlier this week? He was a journalist where they knew he was in what hospital bed he was in. They murdered him. They blew up his room. You know,
Tell us this, Pat.
not a word.
Has I don't always watch RTE, but have RTE reported this kind of thing? Have they on prime time discussed the morality of this kind of thing?
Yeah, in fairness to them, they have. I have to say this, Jude. While they are not brilliant, far from it, they're a hell of a lot better than the BBC.
Hmm.
RT is way ahead of BBC. Now, Jude, and I have to give this, Michael Martin, and have no real graph for Michael Martin, is way ahead of Keir Starmer. And the only person I think is last while, Jude, that deserves any credit is Macron. Macron went on French television earlier. He said what Israel is doing is shameful.
Well, what else could it be? Like this Emily Apple says, our government
Oh,
is complicit in the death of every Palestinian child. Our government is complicit in genocide. This cannot be allowed to
uh,
continue. You see, the trouble is we rage at this, and it clearly is a monstrously unethical action. And yet there's nothing we can do. Just as
no,
Netanyahu's policy of going in and wiping every Palestinian they can find off the face of the earth, he's a war criminal, great, but we don't seem to be able to do anything about it.
uh,
And
uh,
this is really bringing international law into disrepute, which is almost as bad as what Netanyahu is doing. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
but sure. But here's the thing: uh, one of the Israeli ministers uh, sneaked in and out of Britain. And one of the human rights organisations, Britain, when they learned he was there, made an attempt to do a citizen's arrest because he as under a war criminal. It
Yeah.
was blocked by the British government. Keir Starmer stood up, said nothing to do with us. Dude, they allowed
What?
a war.
Did he say
I
that, Pat? Did he
Yeah,
know?
he said what do you call it? One of the back. I think her name was Sultana or something like that.
Yeah.
One of the Labour. She said, "How come this guy was in and Prime Minister, you provided safe haven for him?" He stood up and said, "I did not," and sat down again.
Good God. Well, as I say, I don't know how you guys sleep at night, but I feel equally, besides feeling that I want to condemn them, I feel frustrated. It
Yeah,
does appear, and you know that this experience will pass on to the future. That you can do stuff as a state and get away with it. You can
yeah,
sell huge amount of armaments to people that you know are bent on genocide, and there's no repercussions. You can
yeah.
pummel a state into a state of rubble and no consequences. They can call you a war criminal. Big deal. No consequences. This is bringing the international law into total disrepute. They nearly need to scrap the United Nations and start again.
Absolutely. Dude, yesterday, for some reason, I wasn't very busy yesterday. I had too much time on my hands. So I spent a good lot of yesterday, for some reason, on social media. And I got into a long, harangue and debate with Israeli apologists. They're basically saying these things of starving children are fake news. They're saying, they're they are absolutely in denial about what their country is doing. And by the way, they're not just what do you call it, living in Israel. These are Americans. And in fact, there's an Australian guy come on. Why don't you Irish go back and start drinking your whiskey? Because you obviously don't know what you're talking about, crap, and all the rest of it. Like when you consider the fact that the Lancet is saying that there could be north of 80,000 people dead, and in fact, the true figure will never be known until all the rubble is cleared away and the bodies are found. Jude, what is there? I think there's another figure say somewhere that could be well over 100,000 dead. But anyway, any organization, Amnesty, B'Tselem, Human Rights Watch, have all said that there are hundreds of trucks lined up about 2 miles from where 2.3 million people are starving. And Israel is directly responsible for that. They've bombed hospitals, refugee centers, schools, and so on. And they've denied water and food to all those people. And the world is sitting by, and there are people coming on and saying, "Oh, they're quite entitled to that because they're defending themselves."
Okay. Well, maybe spend enough time on this subject, but let's just
Uh,
end it with this, Pat. Suppose you had a settlement, what kind of situation would you like to have in the Middle East? What arrangement of states?
Jude, there should be a two-state solution. Not, by the way, in the Oslo Accords, the Israelis promised everything and delivered nothing. Basically, what they wanted was they say, "Oh, all right, the Palestinians can have their own state, but we'll control its borders, its air, its sea, and its land." In other words, bollocks. It was an open-air prison. Should be two states. And the Palestinians should give a guarantee that they will be no threat to Israel's security. Israel should give a guarantee to the Palestinians that they will have freedom of movement, self government, and self determination. And there should be no, there should be the as what do you call it? America, China, Russia, EU would monitor and be independent bodies, set up some sort of body to monitor that both sides keep their word, etc., and even have a buffer zone where there's a UN force to ensure that both sides keep away from each other. I'm
Mhm.
sure it's doable under human, resources and mentality. And that, Judy, they've tried everything else. Why don't they try the one obvious thing?
Uh-huh. Well, there is one other alternative, and one that I would sort of dream of, but that's about the size of it, and that is to have one state
Well,
where
fair enough.
everybody is a respected citizen, regardless of what their religion is, regardless of what their
But the
background is.
Israelis will never agree to that, Jude,
Well, this is
despite all the violence.
ridiculous. This is
And
ridiculous. The Israelis come
yeah,
into the Palestine, take over in the Nakba, which was celebrated or bemoaned, was it
yeah.
yesterday? Uh, and
Yesterday, 75
they
years or
take
whatever it
over
was yesterday.
and kick people out of their houses, engage in an ongoing war against them for 70, 80 years. And then they say, no, 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 we won't allow you to have, we don't believe in any secular state where everybody has the same rights and is treated equally. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous. Western
And what
democracy claims,
there's one of their one of their ministers on social media. You can Google it, where he says, "I believe in full democratic rights for all Israelis, but not for Arabs." He's on the record as saying it. I'm not making that up.
dear,
So
dear. How do you see all this ending, Pat? I suppose it's difficult to say, is it? Impossible to say.
Jude, someone. I think when it's all
You're frozen.
over. Well, look, Gaza has flattened. There was someone like there's 400,000 homes
Hmm.
gone. It'll literally take billions and a couple of decades to get it back up and running.
Ah,
I think the Israelis are definitely intending to ethnic cleanse Gaza. Trump, the fucking idiot, is talking about making the Riviera and the Middle East and so on. The rights of a whole race of people are being denied.
do you think
Dude, I
that's how
can't
it'll
see it
happen?
ending well.
Do you think that'll happen?
Jude, I don't know what I don't think. In fairness, I think somewhere there's going to be some American voices saying, "Wait a minute, with that enough's enough." And I think already the Supreme Court in America is starting to turn on Trump already. So
Hmm.
I'm hoping that the sane voices start to emerge. I noticed there's the backlash is starting to come out, about the absolute chaos and mayhem in America. So I'm hoping that somewhere some people are saying, "Wait a minute, enough's enough. We have got
Hmm.
to. What's the end game here?
Hmm.
The Palestinians are going to have rights." But Jude, look at the other side of the story. Trump has been on a victory tour. I know somebody said a grift tour in the Middle East. A 400 million plane been donated to him, and he says there's nothing wrong with that. Jesus, Jude, what do you call it? Have I
He
got a
use it
bottle of
as Air
whiskey?
Force One. He will not use it as Air Force One
He
because
will
it
not
had,
use this. It'll be straight into his backyard.
yeah.
When he's finished as president, Jude, his kids apparently are going have gone before him and are going after him, signing business deals. They're using the power of the presidency. Jude, the corruption and the graft and the grifting, it's out in the open. It's not even hidden. Jude, they are making billions, openly.
But there have been some comments made, even by someone in his own party, about was it this deal that was done? Oh no, it was the plane
The 400
they
million pound
complained
plane.
about. It'd be around, I was going to say it might well be that plane with Air Force One, as it might be someday in Maria, um, that would be prove to be Trump's Achilles heel. But then I thought Trump consists entirely of Achilles' heels.
Yeah,
He's rotten. He's vulnerable all over. If you could only get the International Court of Justice to
just
stand up.
they had to go with Joe Biden's son for allegedly, Hunter Biden for making business deals.
Uh,
These were minor deals. Our friend Trump is out in the open. Hey, Jude, Jude, if tomorrow morning somebody offered you 400 million for something, would you not think at the very least there were strings attached? Remember Charlie Hoy? Remember Ben Dunn?
Here.
Here's something for you, big lad type
Uh,
thing. Or thanks very much, big man. When he
uh,
got him, handed him what was it, 400,000 or whatever the hell it
well,
was. Dude, nobody
here's the
nobody
sobering
gets
thing,
anything
Pat.
for nothing. What?
I was talking to a man today, and he was telling me I got it all wrong. That Trump actually was a very good man. He was able to say and do things that other politicians in America wouldn't say. I was shocked because I really, literally was shocked because in every other respect, this person was a perfectly normal, decent, good human being. But he really believes that we're sucking in propaganda, anti-Trump propaganda, and in fact, Trump is doing great things.
Jude, someone that man should go and seriously up his medication, whatever the fuck he's on, because the reality is, Jude, it's not me and you
Uh,
sucking up propaganda. The evidence of Trump's absolute insanity is out there. This is a man, Jude, who holds up the Bible upside down, by the way, who paid off porn stars. His former solicitor said he done dirty deeds. Bloomberg, the former, no, Bloomberg's
yeah.
TV channel, Michael Bloomberg said he was known to stuff, in other words, not pay people. He told one time they were fixing up his boat and he wouldn't allow a black man on the boat. His father refused, Donald carried on to rent out properties to black people. His he's on the record saying he grabs women by the pussy. Now, Jude, go and tell me what's to admire. By the way, and he also stole money from charity. He's not allowed to run a charity in New York. So tell me, what's the role model here that we're missing?
Well, there's the same thing, he's honest and comes out and says things the way they are, cuts through all the rubbish that the normal politician engages in. And I pointed out, well, several things, but one of the things was that, he has gone along with the idea that, might is right. That's the long and short of it. But
Mm.
then, see, I think he's not all that different from any politicians before him. It's just he's doing it on a more brazen scale. Um,
I
all
know,
right,
Jude. I
okay.
don't buy. No, by the way, see, somebody said to me one time, all American presidents are just American presidents. Presidents, in other words, they do what Americans' interest.
Hmm.
But Jude, I do believe there's some. Like, are you telling me that Jimmy Carter and Donald Trump are the same? No.
No, that's true. That's true. Okay, let's drop this nasty bloody topic. It just depresses me every time I look at it. Let's go on to something else
Uh,
even more depressing. No, 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 that's not true. Joe Duffy, you know Joe Duffy of RTE fame, radio fame,
yeah,
particularly. After 27 years doing Liveline, who did it before him? Was it Marion Finucane did Liveline?
Marion Finucane. Yeah, and what do you call him? Marion Finucane. Yeah, that's who
Yeah.
it was. Yeah.
Anyway, he's given it up after 27 years. He's going to retire. Um, and in the Irish Times, in an article, I'm not sure who did it, but they're saying that he tackled issues that were ignored by the rest of the media. And the question is, who will replace him? And my answer to that is anybody, anybody. I don't think Joe Duffy was a very effective. Well, he was effective if you like a certain type of broadcaster. I thought for a start he was far too gay burn. He was fostered, he was mentored by Gay Byrne, and he held them with there was a Gay Byrne quality about him. For example, when people would ring in with their sad stories, he would do this. Oh dear, oh my God, oh dear, 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 dear. This is the same sort of thing that I remember on one occasion, a famous occasion, on his morning show, Gay Byrne. Some woman, a lot of women were ringing in. They were talking about sicknesses they had and an operation they had to have. And I remember so well, Gay Byrne, I don't know what the thing was, but Gay said, "Oh, he didn't even do it in an ironic way. He said, Oh dear, dear, your poor Tom. Tom. My crop detector isn't working as well as it used to when I was younger, but I still can spot the crop associated with that, and it can spot the crop associated with Joe Duffy. And much of the time, I heard crop from Joe Duffy. So there's my judgment. Sorry, anti-Christian, I know. Yeah.
You know something, Jude? Let's be here. Like when Joe Duffy comes on, I turn it off. Simple, and that's a fact. I've done for years. Now, there's two or three reasons for that. Jude, I find the program well. He used to come on, and Mary, tell me what did he do to you, and how much did you lose? It'd be if on some old lady, and this you know cowboy came around, he fixed her roof and charged her 25,000 for €100 worth and all that. And it used to just depress me, to be honest. I thought, geez, I don't really, I need Prozac after listening to him. Jesus, that's enough. But anyway, let's move on. One thing, and I'm deadly serious about this, he did a program shortly after Martin McGuinness died, which I regard as a total hatchet job, a total setup. He got everybody that had anything in the past to do with Martin McGuinness, all of the guy
The
who's
usual
Austin
suspects.
Stack, whose father was shot dead and all the rest. Not once did he get anybody on from Derry or anything. Say, no, Martin McGuinness was of his time and place. And here's the reason Martin McGuinness turned out the way he did: that he was not some two-faced monster, or two-headed monster. That he was not whatever it was. That a lot of people, and had they grown up, people in Britain who would have joined various organisations to fight against the Nazis. Were they all, psychopaths and all the rest of it? The total lack of balance. And I remember listening to the program. I actually felt so strongly I was going to ring in, and then I said, "No, I'm not going to participate in this sort of charade." It was a setup and all that. And I remember thinking, Martin McGuinness was an elected MP at the time, and so on, and he was the farmer, and he no, he was still dead. I think was he first minister at the time as well. And I thought, remember, a wee bit of balance would have been nice. But Jude, this sort of the West Brit RT, and you said there that he was an acolyte of Gay Byrne. And Gay
Yes.
Byrne, I used to wonder what Gay Byrne. Now, by the way, I'd never agreed with IRAs, and I don't agree with violence. But I remember thinking Gay Byrne's total lack of understanding of what makes Northerners and why Northerners are the way they are,
I
because they
think,
were
in
under
fact, maybe
occupation like the South.
I
Go
believe,
ahead.
as far as I know, Gibbard's father, now I could be wrong on this, but I think his father was an RIC man. Uh,
No,
no.
you could have got. He was in the British Army.
Oh,
His father was in the
oh,
British Army,
I
and
didn't
he
know.
felt, and his father was, I think, involved in the First World War. And when he came back, he was sort of ostracized, and he felt that he had been stabbed in the back by some people he knew who took advantage of the 1960 rising when
God.
he was out fighting for freedom of small nations.
Well,
And
that
Gay grew up
explains a
with this.
lot.
Uh, I mean, Gay never explained that, but Gay's antipathy towards most things to do with republicanism, it was tempered by that. And of course, and he set the tone. The RTE and the Sunday Independent basically nearly reached the stage of saying anything to do with nationalism or republicanism as anathema, that they're bad people and they should be shunned. Dude, some of the best people, the most decent people, the fairest and most liberal are people who I have met who are Republicans.
But Gay Byrne and many others, including Joe Duffy, would only be two members of what was a very wide sort of army of people who were determined
Mm,
to tell people what's going on in the North has no resemblance to anything that ever happened down here. It's
mm.
disgusting. It's disgraceful for them to dare to compare themselves to the noble men and women who give their lives for liberty. And keep the bloodshed up there for God's sake. Don't bring it down here, whatever you do. And you see, that would have a lot of people would have felt that as well. They would have said, "Oh God, yeah, geez, we don't want to have bombs going off in Dublin. We had one. That's quite
Yeah, rightly
enough."
so.
Uh,
Mm,
so they played into that idea of keep them away. It doesn't matter. They're just a share of psychopaths. Keep them at arm's length, and that
yeah,
much of that still lingers. I think. Anyway, I think
yeah.
we've kicked the enough of the shit out of Joe Duffy with that. There's an article by Brianna Parkins, I think, which is even more interesting. I never heard of this woman, but she's called Brianna Parkins,
Neither have
and she's in the Irish Times today, and she's a fine-looking woman, and she says only a few, she made one of these points, only a few of the people who are in the top, at the top in TV get the big money.
Mm.
I hadn't realized
Yeah,
that. She said, you know, a lot of people who appear on TV, they're just making a living and that's it. They're not stars. And that certainly that'd
yeah,
be true of writing as well. You know, you say anything about,
yeah,
oh, I published a book. Did you? Oh, geez, you must be rolling in it. You know, it's only
yeah.
really the superstars and the big guys that really make the big bucks. She says that I think she omits an important point, and that is that people, she was on TV and she was saying, well, I wasn't getting all that much money. But the fact is, a lot of people who've been on TV like her and not get too much money, they love being on TV. I've never met
Yeah.
anybody yet who had a regular spot who didn't love it, including myself.
Mm.
I love being on TV for the few times I was. I loved being on radio. So why not come
Mm.
clean, you know, and stop saying this, oh, I'm doing this work, but I'm not getting enough money. The third
No,
thing,
I
third
think
thing,
now in fairness, there's a wee bit of irony involved there. I love the one she says somebody told her one time she had tea stained teeth, and actually, in fact, Joe, if you see the photograph of her on that, she is far from teeth stained
that's right,
teeth.
she must have got them whitened.
By the way, I was teaching a creative writing class one, and this wee woman, she was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and she wrote this one. That's and one of her stories. She this woman had what it called she had teeth like burnt timber. That was the
That's
most brilliant
good.
description.
That is
Uh,
good.
uh,
That
uh,
is good. Oh boy, that's class. That's class.
no, Judd, you know another thing about it. A lot of people, Danny Doyle, he was very famous afterwards, and he was around Ireland, stepping out Mary whiskey on a Sunday and all that. He
Yeah.
flew to Canada, and somebody asked him, he says, I couldn't make a living in Ireland. So, geez, wait a minute, you're on the radio all the time, you're on the TV all the time, and all the rest of it, and you're only a one-man band. Surely you get paid a couple of hundred quid a night, whatever. But apparently he said he couldn't make a living, he could make a far better living in Canada. So these were all these people on TV and on the radio, and they're saying they weren't earning very much.
Mind you, well, I just come back to this. I mean, it's probably true. Most workers in RTE are not getting big money, and we saw that whenever there was the famous look at what had happened. Incidentally, Kevin Backhurst, I think, is one of the people I will find very hard to forgive, having had that bloody Eurovision Song Contest and not. I think he said, "Oh, we were going to talk to the EU, European Broadcasting Union. Our concerns." For God's sake, it was the only
Yeah, but Jude,
chance that
here, let's
Ireland
get this
had
clear.
to take a
Jude,
stand, and they blew it.
no, hey, right, let me tell you this. The Minister for Communications, whoever the hell it is, I don't know, you can bet your life, Blackhurst was leaned on, don't you dare pull out this, that there's implications for Ireland and all this. So it wasn't a Director General. His political masters would have told him, don't you dare pull out.
Mm. Probably, very likely, very likely. I was going to go on to
Yeah.
several other stories, Pat, but we're very nearly running out of time. Only to say I think you mentioned that this Justine McCarthy has a very good article. She mentions Eurovision and she says what happened in Eurovision will have no effect on the starving children of Gaza. And then she does a forensic description of what it's like for children to starve, about their muscles going, their kidneys going,
Yeah.
they might go blind. Just awful
No, I
stuff.
can't watch that stuff anymore. I
Yeah,
really can't. And I
yeah.
mean that see now on social media, I can't take it. And Jude, no, someone, I think it's affecting my mental health, and I think it's affecting my mental. There's a real depression out there
There is.
there's so
There
much
is.
evil.
Aye, there's so much evil, and there's nothing we can do about it. Not a bloody thing we can do about
Yeah.
it, as far as we can tell. Interesting. That's because I was talking to a Jesuit, and he was talking about a writer called Richard Rohr. And this guy is
Mhm.
a priest in America somewhere. But his belief is that what matters to most people is the culture in which they live, the society in which
Mhm.
they live, the background. That's where the sin is. And it says, if you look at the Bible, the Old Testament, even the prophets are given out about societies, not about against individuals. And really, if you think about it, Jesus in the New Testament as well, he's not going after individuals. He's blaming, Pharisees or whatever it is, the
Aye.
collective. And that's the truth.
Yeah.
I was brought up as a kid never to think that way. I was the one that sinned. Not at all,
Yeah,
nothing to do with the society I growing up in.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
that brings
yeah,
us back to Martin McGuinness. You know, you come back.
yeah.
Why did he turn out the way he was? Because the war came to him. Because
Yeah.
the Ireland was.
Not just said that to me. He said, "I didn't go looking for a war. It's no more a psychopath than you or I, you know." But things change people. As Dennis Bradley said to me one time, he says, "Pat, it's amazing what people can do if they're how they're affected by time, place, and circumstance."
That's for sure. That's for sure. Well, have any little jokes to cheer up our devoted followers, or will we
No,
advise
maybe
them where